In this article, we've looked at how people are looking to travel in the near future. So we've looked at how people are searching for flights and how then people are picking those flights out of the search information that they have. We've had access to 5,000 million data searches on Skyscanner. Essentially, pretty much every search anybody across the world has made between November 2018 and April 2020. And what we have seen with this huge amount of data is a massive change in the last 18 months, 2 years. In the way in which people search. When we got closer towards the date when coronavirus started to affect different locations in the world, we could really see a trend. We could see a substantial change in how people search. Not only how much people searched, but also where people were searching to fly to. Are people's sentiments and people's confidence towards traveling towards particular destinations, essentially in Northeast Asia, including China, South Korea, Japan, we saw a drop in willingness to fly by more than 80%. So people were searching to fly 80% less often than they had been the previous year. Now you need to remember, put this in context, for flights for 2019, searches had gone up by 80% compared to the previous year. So we're not just doing a drop of 80%, we're actually doing a drop of 160%. From a market that was growing at a potential of 80% in desire to travel, we had now dropped at below 80% from the previous year, right? So the drop was massive. What we have seen is that the number of flight picks has dropped even more. So essentially, some people may look at flight searches and see, with coronavirus, are still flights available for next December 2020? Will I be able to go Christmas, to go home for Christmas to see my family? After looking at that, you may say, oh, flight is still available, that's okay. Or, wow, prices are very expensive. Flight Picks actually goes further and clicks and says, let me look at this flight in particular. The flights have varied, okay? So we've looked at, for example, South Europe to see what the situation in Spain and Italy was compared to Northern Europe. And we saw that clearly the market responded much more quickly by avoiding Southern Europe. Or we then looked at Middle East, for example, where the willingness to fly to the Middle East and from the Middle East is still higher than it would be, for example, for Northeast Asia. So we've done some modeling, and the article essentially compares how, when we've done comparisons over time, or comparisons across different destinations, comparisons between searches being done on the 7th of April compared to the 30th of April, there has been a further drop in consumer confidence. And we're able to see how individual events in particular countries are able to then, events, for example, in increases or number of deaths from coronavirus or political instability in the country due to politicians kind of releasing further information on restrictions and so on. We can get data at the granular level to then see how that affects specifically confidence to travel in particular countries. I think there's going to be a number of layers in how people respond to coronavirus and to pandemics in general. The first thing we have seen is people go hypermobile. I mean, people actually have turned their physical travel experiences to online travel experiences in the same way that, and companies are responding quite well to this. So you're seeing the companies say, you can no longer come to the theater online. You can no longer travel to a particular destination, but here are beautiful documentaries to travel to my destination online. So there still is an affinity towards a particular place. The second thing we are seeing is people are becoming leisure visitors in their home location again. People are rediscovering their locality and saying, actually, I don't need to travel so far. I can just have day visits from home, and there are beautiful things to do here as well. The third thing we're going to find is that it's going to be the local day trip market and local overnight stay market that will recover. And international travel will take quite some time. From our patterns, because we're mostly looking at flights, essentially with our study, what we are seeing is people will choose to fly first to destinations that they're already familiar with. People will not choose to travel to destinations where they've never been to before. And we saw this, for example, when we look at the inbound markets for Spain, my home country, in the second part of our study. So we saw that it is the countries that already have a high propensity to travel to Spain that are choosing to start to look at flights to travel back to Spain again, okay? And the market essentially shows that we fully recover. Our willingness to travel by Christmas is fully restored to where it had been 12 months ago. Not because we think that it's going to be like that, but because we hope that is going to be the case. and mostly we'll tend to travel back to places that we've already been. So part of our risk management strategy as individual travelers will be to go back to places either because of nostalgia, we have fond memories of a place, or because we believe the place we've already been to, we can already see now ahead, we can visualize how we might behave in that particular location if there are still risks of pandemic. I think the paper has two levels here. One is the data per se, and the fact that the data is up to date to the 30th of April 2020 means that people can look at this, destinations can look at this and can see the actual practical value it has for them and the impact that coronavirus has had, particularly for their part of the world. But I think that actually the more important lesson from this paper is that destination management organizations keep using traditional statistics, keep going out there to collect questionnaires from people who have already traveled to our destinations. And they're taking their decisions based on essentially past data. This is a little bit like driving your car by only using the rear view mirror, okay? You cannot use historic data and assume historic data will be a good predictor of future performance. And in a moment like this, with data uncertainty, with future uncertainty, a lot of destinations, a lot of businesses have become totally paralyzed and they've realized they need to learn new skills. Big data is really useful for destinations to plan, and it is useful because it allows you to look ahead. It allows you to have, real data of what's happening today. The data can always be very much up to date. If I go to the platform we use, Forward Keys, to analyze all the data from Skyscanner, we can look at who was searching for flights yesterday, not only who actually flew, but who was searching yesterday for flights. And if there was a new announcement on television from, for example, what's happening now in the US with riots, we can see immediately the change in patterns in how people search for flights going to and from the US, from anywhere in the world. So this allows you to have very timely decision-making processes. The challenge that we have as a DMO is that even though you may have timely data, you then need to be prepared to take timely decisions based on data. Now, the beauty of using big data in the way that we have is that it allows us to look at masses and masses of data. It allows us to do this at this particular moment in time. It allows us to do very specific queries. So, for example, with the data we have from Skyscanner, we can look at specific changes from airport to airport in the world. How are people searching today to fly from London to Barcelona as opposed to London to Madrid? And why is it that certain searches are going up and other searches are going down? So on the data, for example, that we had for Spain, we could see which are the airports in the world where desire to travel to Spain, and particular airports in Spain, has gone up, and in other airports it has gone down. So we could identify from which cities in the UK people were willing to travel to the most to Spain, and from which other cities the demand was dropping. The traffic light system that we design essentially is a way of helping a destination to look at which will be the markets that are most likely to recover early on and which other markets are going to be behind. We set the numbers on the traffic lights as green, orange, and red based on the patterns of searches from those destinations to Spain in this case, but we could have done it for any other destination. But essentially the travel patterns, to find out from which markets do we have there is an increased traffic in terms of searches to fly to Spain in general, and we could have done it for sub-destinations particularly, from which markets there is a slight drop in the searches, and from which markets there is a substantial drop. For example, in this case, what we found is that to travel to Spain, there is an increased number of searches from the UK and from Ireland. We suspect in part both because they're very loyal markets to Spain, but also in part because to go on holiday from the UK and Ireland, you rely on airplanes much more than you do if you live in Germany. So we have seen a drop in searches from countries like Germany, even though they're very loyal to Spain as a destination, but because Germany has an alternative of saying this year I will drive 12 hours to go to southern France or Spain as opposed to flying for 90 minutes to go to that same place. Whereas, of course, in countries where you rely on airplanes, that is not the case. But the advantage of the traffic light system is that it's science-based, but it reduces the complexity of large volume of numbers into something that even a politician with a short attention span and having to take decisions very quickly is able to understand how we're going to take decisions based on this data. DMO can start specific recovery marketing campaigns to promote particular locations where the desire to travel is higher. Now, I understand DMOs don't do that. They'll probably do blanket marketing campaigns that will be totally useless, and they'll do that for political reasons, not basically using intelligent data. But I urge tourist destinations to put politics aside for a moment and to look at what are going to be the most cost-effective strategies to promote specific locations. And if this is the year where we're going to get people desiring to travel from smaller airports to smaller airports because they feel more safety by traveling from a smaller airport and a smaller airplane, and wanting to travel to rural locations as opposed to city breaks, we need to repurpose our marketing campaigns to actually give people what they're willing to buy, because otherwise another competing destination will do. You should focus on repeat visitors that you already have data for, that you know have been loyal to your destination, because they're the most likely that will trust your message and they will be likely to consider booking with you. If you have data for people that own second homes in your destination, target them. Target them not only to come themselves, but to allow friends and family to use their second home, and then move on to markets that have already traveled regularly to where you are at. Focus to start with on promoting destinations outside cities. City breaks are dropping really fast. Focus on self-catering properties in rural areas. The latest market to recover is going to be cruising, followed by city breaks in large hotels. The key challenge here is not access to data. You can do this by buying data from telephone companies or looking at sentiment analysis online. The key problem here is not availability of data. Is first having data scientists in your destination management organization that know how to search that data, how to mine that data. Because the challenge with big data is it's very, very easy to get lost. Unless you've got a very specific query, you can just drown in data. And then the second thing is having a political system that allows you to be agile enough to be able to take new decisions that are based on evidence. And one of the main problems I see with tourist destinations is we do not take evidence-based policy decisions. I need to be careful with how I say this, of course, but I believe that tourist destinations have been able to do this because for most people, the jobs that they have working for the DMO are secure. If you worked in the private sector, you would be pushed to have competition. And if your particular hotel brand in a destination didn't do well, you would notice a change very quickly. I am horrified when I see destinations producing a leaflet in one language, typically their home language, and then translating it to 10 different languages and assuming that all of those different markets will want exactly the same thing from that tourist destination. Now, you may tell me that doesn't happen very often, but I still see it. I see brochures that were produced more than 20 years ago when I was working in a particular DMO. And now I go to a tourist office and I still see the same brochure, but now it's been translated to 2 more languages. Now it's also in Chinese and in Russian, as well as in French, English, German, and Dutch. And I think this is just ridiculous. The world has changed so much. Why are we still not moving forward? And we're just trying to do a lot of things, many of which we never evaluate how effective those particular marketing campaigns are. We really have to move on, and I'm genuinely hoping that the current shake-up allows a lot of tourist destinations to actually really analyze how effective particular things are. My concern is that we will not stop doing the things that are evaluated as being ineffective, but we'll stop doing the things that actually probably were most effective, or most cost effective in any case, simply because we tend to do things based on habit. One of the things that it shows is that conducting traditional research, where we go and do cross-sectional study of how people feel by sending a questionnaire and then trying to publish the questionnaire 12 months later in a traditional journal article, is essentially doing a post-mortem, if we're really honest. This is not helping us look ahead. Look at the way in which medical research is being published. It's published immediately. Articles are quick. The peer review process is thorough, but it's very, very immediate. And I think we need to move towards a system that's much more agile about producing meaningful research, when the data in particular is time sensitive. So it comes to show that a lot of the research that we do in tourism isn't time sensitive. We're doing historical research. We can learn from some of that historical research if we're trying to understand which will be the best theories to help us explain people's behavior. But there are specific studies for which we are working with time-sensitive data and that can actually genuinely help industry to make changes. And if we want to create impact from our research, we then need to look at much more agile ways of collecting data ourselves and engaging with industry in how we use that data.